Hello and welcome to another edition of Prove All Things. I want to thank everybody who's joining us today, whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, or on the CGI Digital Network app, whether that's on your phone, tablet, or television. We thank you for joining us, and also all those who are joining us later as listening or watching this as a podcast. I'm joined with co-host Mike James from Los Angeles. How you doing?
Hey Jeff, good to see you today. We're experiencing winter weather here the last week or so, and
Yeah.
for a few more days. I actually had snow on Saturday. It was
Wow.
actually sticking to the ground, and I couldn't believe it. But it all melted by the time I got back from church. But it was snowing. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I heard that they had like several feet in Los Angeles County in the mountains, I would guess.
Yeah, definitely. There's some mountain ranges here, some near Pasadena, and then over here, I'm in San Bernardino County, which is right next to Los
Mhm,
Angeles County, going east. And we've got a big Bear Mountain. It's called, about an hour from me, and
mhm.
they had about 57 inches of snow this past weekend. So
Wow, that is that is a lot of snow. Well, I'm glad
yeah,
I'm glad you're okay and you're doing fine, I guess, where you're at.
yeah,
Here in
I'm
Atlanta,
okay.
we're doing good here. We've had, for the past week, we've had, like, 70 degrees, 80-degree weather for the past
Wow.
week, so it's been
Yeah,
really, really nice enjoying the warmth while
yeah.
the rest of the nation is freezing and covered in snow. We've got, I guess, the warm air had to go somewhere, and it came down south, so we're
Yeah,
happy to have it.
good
So
for you.
yeah, excited about today's program. We have a special guest we've had several times before. I'm going to go ahead and bring him in here now. We have Jim O'Brien joining us from Cincinnati.
How you guys
Jim,
doing?
how you doing?
Better than I deserve, as Dave Ramsey says. Good to see
Okay,
you
yeah, I've
guys.
heard him.
Yeah, good to
How's the
see you.
weather in Cincinnati?
It changes from minute to minute. We actually had 72-degree weather here a couple of days ago, and then it turns to 30 or something like that. So if you don't like it one day, you might find it to your liking the next.
All right, wonderful, wonderful. Well, good to see you. How you been since we've last had you on the program? What have you been up to?
Uh, we've uh, we've done a lot of things. We decided to take it sort of was a God thing. We wanted to do a sabbatical for years, just to get away, and so I decided we had an opportunity to go for 28 days. Dusty Howe was here at church, and he could take care of things, and so Don and I could go to Florida, and I wanted to read through the Bible in 28 days, and I did. Well, with a few chapters short, but I wanted to get an overview of the themes, what's going on, just get an overview, and it was one of the best things I've ever done. It was fantastic. So we're happy.
Very
All right.
good, very good. Where's the feast this year, Jim?
We will be in Panama City Beach, Florida.
Mhm.
Okay.
That is the one I'm going to be at. I've already got my place reserved
Ah,
to
good to
stay
know.
there.
Well,
Panama City's it's a great location. People should come
we
out and enjoy the warm weather there.
okay. Can we schedule you for a few things?
Yeah, you found that I'm going to be there. I guess so. Yes.
Absolutely, great.
Yeah.
That's all I
All
need
right.
to be there, and we will send the Irish mafia after you to bring you over to do work.
So what is today's topic that you have
You know,
scheduled for us today?
uh, the commandments are a huge factor, and I thought it would be good to go through the commandments, particularly the Sabbath. Why do we keep the Sabbath? What's so important about it? There was a death penalty imposed for not keeping the Sabbath. We don't kill people now for not keeping the Sabbath. I don't know. I haven't heard of any congregations that pull somebody up in front of the group and stone them, but I don't think that's happened. So why don't we do that now? Why
Yeah, I don't think any Jewish sects or any Jewish people do that either.
No, I don't think they do it either.
Yeah. So anybody's doing that.
I did hear a number of years ago that in Israel, in certain neighborhoods where the Orthodox Jews live, that if people are out and about doing certain things, that stones have been thrown. So I did hear that years ago. So
okay. As long as Sandy Koufax didn't live there, it was okay. So, that's interesting. Is anybody old enough like I am to remember Sandy Koufax?
Yes, I do remember him from just reading about the Dodgers when they had Koufax. I wasn't old enough to have been around to watch the games that he played in.
Yeah, I wasn't born.
I feel. Let me bask in this moment for just a second. I'm older than dirt. Sandy Koufax was a great left-handed pitcher, and he would not play. He's Jewish. He would not play on the holy days. So that was an interesting thing back then. So when the World Series came around, and they said, "Oh no, we're going to get killed," and Koufax won in the 7th game, he wouldn't play in the 6th. So he was blessed, and the Dodgers were blessed. So those are good memories.
Very good, very good. Yeah, I'm out here in LA now, so I hear a lot about the Dodgers. So.
Yeah, you're in athletic land. A lot of teams out there.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
So we got a lot of things revolved around the Sabbath, but let me give a little background. When we start in Exodus 20, which is the chapter of one of the chapters of the 10 Commandments, that in Deuteronomy 5, but it's interesting. In verse 1, he says, God spoke all these words. Now, that's a definitive statement that these are not the commandments of Moses. They are the commandments of God, the creator of the universe. And there is no other such circumstance in the history of man that God would speak such words, or any kind of religious document that says, our God says such things. So this is unique. And here are the 10 Commandments, or as they are referred to in some circles.
Judging Hal was here at church, and he could take care of it.
Okay, so there are 10 statements, or 10 icons, or 10 words. Decalogue actually means 10 words. And that then comes up again in John, the 1st chapter. In the beginning was the Word. So there's a connection then with Jesus Christ, the Word, and the 10 Commandments, the 10 words. Jesus being the one who would have been the being who gave those commandments. There are those who don't believe that. I understand they may disagree with that. We have a right to believe that he was the one. So he was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him. Without him, nothing was made that was made. So the covenant of the 10 Commandments is the only covenant between a deity and an entire people. So it wasn't just made with Moses, it was made with an entire nation. The covenant of the 10 Commandments is, pardon me, let me compare that. Baptism is a covenant between an individual and God.
Okay. Gotcha.
The Old Testament is a covenant between God and the descendants of Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
So the New Testament presents a covenant between God and the Israel of God, as Paul referred to. The Old Covenant was a covenant between God and the people of Israel. Now,
Mm-hmm.
there's a question that comes up sometimes. How could Paul do away with circumcision? What would be his basis for that? Because you can read the Old Testament from Genesis all the way up to Malachi, and you're not going to find a statement that says, the circumcision was not a commanded thing of the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
There's reason to. So how could he do that?
Well, can I offer like I guess an idea?
Please.
I guess the way I've always looked at it, maybe perhaps I'm wrong, is that that was a way of entering into the covenant for the people was through circumcision, where today we enter in it through baptism.
Yeah, that's
That
right.
that, that okay, hey, good.
You're exactly right. Now, so why have circumcision anyway? Why not baptism in the beginning?
Mm-hmm.
Israel was a unique nation. When the Israelites were there, they were not of the Egyptian DNA, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore they were not considered on the same level or the same plane as an Egyptian. Even Joseph could not eat with the Egyptians. So there, the difference with Israel then was you don't just have to be a descendant of Abraham. What you have to be is circumcised. Anybody could be an Israelite that was circumcised.
Mm-hmm.
Paul recognized that concept. So when we come to New Testament times and they are saying you must be circumcised to be a Christian, which was essentially saying you have to be a Jew before you can be a Christian. And
Mm-hmm.
Paul is saying, no, no, no.
Mm-hmm.
You guys misunderstood circumcision in the first place. It was a circumcision of the heart. And that term, circumcision of the heart, is even used in the Old Testament. So
Mm-hmm.
the idea is it is not race, it's not DNA, it's not
Mm-hmm.
genetics, it is heart. So the Old Testament is a
Mm-hmm.
covenant between God and the descendants of Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
New Testament presents a covenant between God and the Israel of God.
You know what?
Baptism.
I never really thought about what you're saying, but I guess like circumcision is a physical difference that's done that again and different races or families maybe have different characteristics, right? Have different physical characteristics where you can recognize. I think they're from the same family or from the same race or whatever, and I guess that's one thing that can take anyone and make them part of the same kind of family in a sense,
Same family.
physically.
And what makes us a part of the family of God? It's the heart.
Mm-hmm.
It's being impregnated with the Holy Spirit so that we are born again in the way that we think. And ultimately, we become born again as literal members of the family of God. So the born again process begins at baptism. We think differently. Our spirit becomes different. And that was the key that Paul was looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hey Jim, I just wrote an article. It's in the new edition of the International News on biblical slavery, and in part of the article, I'm addressing the fact that there is some theory amongst some commentators that the slaves who became part of Israel that they could actually be proselytized and be decide to become Israelites after circumcision. Now, there's not a specific scripture that says that, but there is implications within the Old Testament for that fact. And like you were saying in Deuteronomy 10 and verse 16, it actually says, circumcise therefore the foreskin of your heart and be no more stiff necked. And when we go back to when circumcision started with Abraham, in Genesis 17 and verse 13, it says there, he that is born in thy house, and he that is bought with thy money must needs be circumcised. Now, if Abraham was buying people with money, they were likely alien slaves. They were likely strangers. They weren't Hebrews, and he could make them part of his family through that act of circumcision. So I just wanted to offer those scriptures there.
Yeah, you brought up something else that was fascinating point in that discussion, and that is a slave. What would that mean to him, having been a slave all of his life, and now he is offered freedom? And circumcision meant freedom, freedom from the confines of what they had grown up with and lived with.
Well, again, and there's the parallel because Israel was in slavery in Egypt. They came out, and so that's a sign of leaving slavery. And I guess, sin's the kind of slavery for us that we get to leave when we get baptized.
We got connections going all over the place now.
Yeah.
So Paul is saying that circumcision overrules DNA, and that God intended Israel to be a light to other countries, not just to Israel. But it's kind of like the U.S. People used to send their children here to go to college, to be taught. So that's what God intended for all the world, that Israel would be a teaching, a light. And in the resurrection, in the millennium, that's the way it's going to return. Israel will become the light, and I don't mean Israel physically, but those who are converted, who have their hearts changed, will be teachers of the rest of the world. Okay, so a second factor is that the covenant of the Ten Commandments was unique in that it was a relationship between the people and God, but it also included the relationship with other human beings. So it wasn't just a relationship to God. It was a relationship to the way you treat other people. You don't steal, you don't kill, you don't lie, you don't covet what belongs to them. So it is how you treat your fellow man. This was unique. No other God had ever had such a statement of how we are to believe, how we are to treat other human beings. Third, the Ten Commandments includes both religious and social obligations as a part of a divine will. So a person who is unethical is not regarded as religious. So that incorporates the third commandment: don't take God's name in vain. That is, don't carry his name in vain. Don't act in such a way that it'll turn people off. I hesitate to bring up names, but remember the Fred Phelps, the guy who was he was a crazy man.
Was he the guy who was saying 2012 was the return of Christ? Or
he was the guy who picketed.
Oh, the picketed guy. I got it, yeah.
And he would go every place because of homosexuality and things like that. So here's a funeral for a soldier who's died, and he didn't bring a blessing on God's name.
That's the Westboro Baptist Church, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Good one, Jeff, pulling that out. Yeah.
The name sounded familiar.
I remember that once you said it. Yeah.
He didn't carry God's name in a way that all of us want to go say, I want to go join that God. That's the God. But here's the God that let us out of slavery. That's the God I want to follow.
Yeah.
Fourth, the Ten Commandments are simple and absolute. It's not just, hey, be a nice guy. It is, you are to do this. Now, there may be discussions on how a commandment is applied, how to observe the Sabbath. We can say bearing false witness, and what about Rahab the harlot, and when she was dishonest, and so on. But there are specifics. So how we may address those things, we can have differences of viewpoint, but that they are commands of God, and they're not relative to culture. It's not saying that, you live in Ireland, it's different there. Or you live in England, or you live in the U.S. or Mexico, therefore those commandments don't apply. The commandments are not relative to culture, they are universal. Furthermore, they weren't even given in Israel. They were outside the land. They were over in Egypt when these commandments were given. So go ahead. Yeah, I think I hear you getting ready to jump in there, but I don't want to step on you. Okay. There are 4 defining characteristics of the commandments. One, I just mentioned, they are not abstract. To be a good person, they define specific behavior. 8 of the commandments are negative. Thou shalt not do this. In other words, as a parent, you're raising children, and you don't want to quench their spirit. You like their liveliness, and you want them to grow up with a positive attitude. But there are certain things, so you want to give them as much room as possible. But then there are certain things you say, you cannot do this. In other words, I have your cell phone for you, but you get on this particular, and there are dire consequences. They are formulated in the terms of obligations, not rights. You shall love your neighbor as yourself is formulated not as a right to be loved, rather than as a you should love as you want to be loved. So you have a higher obligation than the person who is a sinner. And fourth, it's addressed to a singular person. You shall not steal, because a good society is composed, a virtuous society is composed of people who do the right thing. For example, a shoplifter who goes into Walmart and steals something, and then you go in there and buy something, who's paying for what he stole? You are. So the rest of society is being damaged by what this one person has done. Every thief or shoplifter is stealing from the other customers. Okay. Then he says, I am the Lord your God. Now, this is interesting. For a lot of us, it was new to realize that different groups number the commandments differently. My wife grew up as Catholic, and so they combined, they divided the taking graven images. How was it? I think that's what it was, or they combined it. Yeah, they combined those two commandments, and so she thought that the commandments were numbered differently. So she was just a young girl riding down the street with her parents, and and so there's this big sign up: "Thou shalt not break the 6th commandment with your car," which meant thou shalt not kill to Protestants. To a Catholic, that meant thou shalt not commit adultery with your car. She said, how do you commit adultery with your car?
Wow, that's funny.
So Jews will look at the 10 commandments, that this is the first commandment or the first statement. I am the Lord your God. And so having no other gods before me then is combined with graven images. Okay. The reason for that, and I think there is good reason for it, is that all of the commandments hang on this one statement: I am the Lord your God. So anything I say, that's what you're to do. And it's like all of the commandments hang on these 2 words, love God and love your fellow man. There is something that supersedes this statement. In other words, if my house is burning down or my neighbor's house is burning down on the Sabbath, I might pitch in with a hose and go out there and put that fire out or help put it out. So, we have 3 children. They were all born on the Sabbath. Thankfully, there was somebody there at the hospital that was working to, because I would not have been good delivering that baby at home. Even though my children have had home births, I was not going to be the one who start my obstetrics career with at home with my wife. Okay. So the statement then, I am the Lord your God, may be less intended as does God exist, but who is God? Therefore, I am the Lord your God. I am Yahweh or Jehovah, however one may want to pronounce that, depending on the vowels. I am God. So he brought them out of slavery. Therefore, he has a right to demand observance to the commandments that they should follow. Now, notice he doesn't say, do this for me. He is saying, you're going to be my people, therefore you shall act in an upright way. If you don't, you're not my person, you're not one of my children if you're going to rob and steal and lie and cheat and things like that.
Yeah, what's the line? What's the line? Be holy as I am holy, and then
Mhm.
it's reiterated in the New Testament to
Mhm.
try to reach towards perfection, even though we
Mhm.
won't do it in this carnal body, but that's the goal,
Mhm.
A great point that we are made in the image of God. It's not enough just to be made in the physical image of Jesus Christ. We
Mhm.
need to be made in the spiritual image. That's
Mhm.
the goal. So he's the one who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Now, why doesn't God refer to himself as the creator? And that's an interesting point. I'm the one who brought you out. He doesn't say, I'm your creator, I'm the one who gave you life. There's a sense that he is expressing himself as a caring God. Um, I don't know if you guys are so young, so I got to take you back with some history. But when I was going through college and I was taking theology, there was a guy named Althauser out of the Candler School of Theology in Candler School of Theology down at Emory University. His name was Althauser, and he believed in the Nietzsche concept that God is dead. In other words, that God had established this world, he had set it in motion like a computer program, and it was just going to run through, and
Mhm.
he would not be involved with it. That is the God is dead theology. It's not that God doesn't exist, it's that he has removed himself
Mhm.
from human interaction and just let things run. This totally repudiates that concept.
Mhm.
I am the God who brought you out of Egypt. I intervened. I'm a caring father. I take care of you. You
Mhm.
can call on my name and I will hear your voice. I will answer your prayers. So it's not just up to mankind to work out the problems. God is saying that he is with his people and he cares for his people. Third, God identifies himself as the liberator of slaves. Um, this is one of the most important things that is revealed throughout Scripture. That God is um, fully involved with man being free. Uh, we're all the three of us are all married. If we had the first time we had seen the girl that we're married gone out and grabbed her by the nape of the neck and said, "Come on, woman, you're coming home with me, and you're gonna you're
Mhm.
gonna cook my dinner. You're gonna take care of me when I'm sick. You're gonna sleep in my bed. You're gonna bear my children." Uh, you know, uh, it would not have made a great impression.
That's the caveman approach, I guess.
Amen. Approach. So God wants people to be convicted. He is God. To be grateful to Him. And liberty is essential to that. Even the founding of this country, there on the Liberty Bell is the statement from Leviticus 25:5: proclaim liberty throughout all of the land and to all of the inhabitants thereof. So, and he says, brought you out of the house of bondage. Hebrew literally says house of slaves. And why does he say that? Well, I don't want you to romantic. Go ahead. You going to jump in there? Um, God is simply saying, I don't want you romanticizing Egypt. You remember how the Israelites had already spoken of how good it was in Egypt, uh, even though they murdered their babies. Uh, I had a conversation uh, back during the 70th anniversary of uh, Kristallnacht, and it was with a Jewish professor. Uh, I just loved the guy. He was gentle, kind, he was brilliant. And so we invited him to speak at the Winter Family Weekend, uh, in commemoration of that, because he had been interred with in one of the concentration camps. And we talked, we were having lunch together, and he said to me, "Look, I don't know why we don't just uh, give in to the Iranians. After all, there are synagogues in Iran." And I almost fell out of the chair. I honestly wanted to cry. You have been a member. You have been in a concentration camp. You were separated from your mother. Your father was killed, uh, and you're saying give in to these people? Why fight? It doesn't make sense. I knew a minister once when I was a Methodist minister, and he had immigrated to the U.S. from Cuba, and he talked about how under who was the dictator in Cuba before Castro. Anyway, he said at least we had freedom. We could pick up. We could go out and get grapefruit or oranges, mango. Nobody starved to death. So when Castro came to power, we lost all of that. We were in total submission. So freedom is an essential concept of Christianity, of righteousness, of uprightness, and it's what God wants us to be. I had a professor in college, and his name was Dr. Lobachko. He was from Russia, and Dr. Lobachko was there when Stalin was in power. And he said that one day they were having a community meeting, and his uncle had asked a question, and the next day there was a limousine pulled up to the house, and his uncle was taken away, and they never saw him again. In other words, there was no such thing as freedom. You couldn't ask questions, and so freedom is an essential characteristic to God. And then he says, "You shall have no other gods before me." We think of false gods as idols, but it doesn't say idols. It says false gods. A false god is anything that is an end in itself rather than a means to coming to God. Monotheism means there is one God who is the creator. And a false god is something that takes us away
Mm-hmm.
from the true God. What can that be? Well, it could be education. If it's science that takes us away from God, then there's something wrong. Education is supposed to make people better, but education.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the people in Germany that murdered children, that enslaved the country. They used education to make bombs, to make gases, to destroy people. So education can be, if it doesn't take us to God, then it's a false God. It's an
Mm-hmm.
idol.
I guess we can make ourselves idols. I guess
We can make ourselves idols.
Put ourselves before God.
We can think too much of what we think.
Mm-hmm.
That's why baptism means you die. It's a watery grave. You go down in that grave and you die daily.
When you're nothing, God can then work with you. But if you think you're something, then it's hard to work with what's already there, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And what does that say about the resurrection? Is it possible that people could ever, when Jesus Christ is on the throne in Jerusalem, is somebody going to turn against him? But there will be people to turn against him because they think too much of themselves and their own thoughts. a recognition, an honest, humble recognition of who God is. Art can be an idol. Love can be an idol. Saul Bellow said, "You're only as good as what you love." The people who loved Hitler, Stalin, and Mao, as well as mass murderers who are in prison, are no better than the tyrant that they love. So, religious cult leaders, people can stop thinking. They stop putting God first. Every human being has to come to the stage to say, this religious leader did not die for me. Jesus Christ died for me. That's the one I worship, not this particular religious leader. I worship God the Father. I worship his Son who died for me, but I don't worship this individual religious leader. Music and art. My son and I, when he was sophomore in high school, we'd go out to eat lunch. Okay, so there's this restaurant up the road from us, and Chris and I were there eating, and this teenage waitress comes up, and she had a real thick accent. And so I asked her where she was from. She said, Russia. I said, Russia. And I said, what do you miss about Russia? And what's the biggest difference you find between Russia and the U.S.? And she said, Russians are more spiritual. I said, really? I said, but Russia used to be an atheist country. And she said, yes, but we have the arts. In other words, arts were her God. Ballet, music, things like that. Reason, philosophically, people can worship reason. But reason does not automatically lead to moral decisions. If you live a life just for yourself, reason will accomplish that. But, bearing children is not economically, physically, or emotionally justifiable. It can only be justified by godly morals. Religious people have more children than they do, than atheistic people do. I was in a restaurant. I was getting my car serviced at a car dealership this last week, and I just been reading this thing about religious people have more children than non-religious people. Matter of fact, I don't know if you really heard the statistic lately, but 20% of married couples, young married couples, have committed to not having children.
Wow. Yeah, that's a interesting statistic. And the first country that legalized abortion was the Soviet Union. So that goes in tune with what you're saying there.
So that's right. So I'm at this auto dealership, and this lady comes in, and she has a little girl, and the girl kept, waving at me and speaking, and so I would say hi back to her, and so I said to the lady, "Is that your only child?" She said, "No, I have 3." I said, "Oh, really?" I was just reading that religious people tend to have children. You take whether they're Catholic or evangelical Christian or Mormons, so on. They will tend to have more children. And I said, "Are you religious?" She said, "Yes, very religious." So it was proof there right before me that this transcends what is easy, what is reasonable. Reason would say, don't have kids. There's a family in our congregation that has 6 kids, and they had 5, and they had a niece and a nephew. They would be uncle and aunt to this niece, and the father died, and the mother was addicted to drugs. So even though they had 5 kids, they said, we got to take in the 6th. That's not reasonable. 5 was enough. But they said, no, it is a duty to God. Okay. So if you put reason first, you need God. If you put God first, you need reason. That's the combination for success. So religious faith can be an idol. Look, Jesus told the Pharisees, you traverse land and sea to make one convert. And when you do, you make him twice as much a child of hell as you are. So even religious faith can be. Now, I could go through a number of other things there, but I want to get to this thing about the Sabbath while I have time. Because I wanted to give a background for the Ten Commandments. Let me get to it here. Don't take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Now, remember is an important word. For 40 years, they were reminded of the Sabbath day by the cycle of manna. He seems to be saying, never forget the Sabbath day. Don't forget to keep the Sabbath. It doesn't say, my grammar is really good. It doesn't remember the Sabbath day to rest, but it should be our primary aim to make it holy. It's distinct from other days because it's elevated to God. In fact, holy work is permitted. For a Levite to be slaughtering cattle for sacrificing was work. The work done by the ministry is work, but it's done to make the Sabbath holy.
Yeah, you're getting me now because I'm driving to New Mexico this weekend for 10 hours one way. So
you got it. Employment for profit, he's saying, is not really holy. Therefore, working for money on the Sabbath violates the law. So the laws of God are universally binding because they are beneficial to all of mankind. Would it be good for all men to worship the God of Moses? Or should it apply only to the Jews? If the Ten Commandments are a basic moral code for every civilization, why would the Sabbath be excluded? Societies which have adopted the Ten Commandments have benefited immeasurably. The Supreme Court building has an engraving of Moses holding the tablets of stone over the rear entrance of the Supreme Court building. We have in front of our church building these big stone tablets with the Ten Commandments on them. So it is kind of a reminder. We got those from a Protestant church, which said they don't believe them. Now, this was a Christian church that said, we don't want the Ten Commandments in front of our building. And so I have to tell our congregation from time to time, here's a memorial when you walk in here of the Ten Commandments, and we have it because others have rejected. You understand?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, okay, I'm curious. So you bought these from a church that no longer wanted to display them?
No, they gave them to us.
They gave them to you. They say we don't keep those. So here you go.
There was a man in the congregation
in
that particular church, and he wanted those out in front of his church, so he bought them and he had them put out there, and so they were out there for a while, and finally the board and the minister got together and they said, look, we don't want those out there, get rid of them. So a member of our church was friends with him, and he said, we'd like to have them. So that's how we got them, because they rejected them.
Wow.
I'm saying this to say we are not inherently good. All human beings are evil, but what separates us is a commitment to God. And this is a unique thing that you guys are doing, and all of us are doing as a part of the commandment believing churches of God. This is a great contribution to humanity. We should not undermine the blessing that this is giving to the people who are listen to this and are convicted by it. Okay, so they are universal laws that reflect universal values. Our universal value is freedom, but freedom is not a value to cultures that don't believe in God. There is slavery in Arab countries. There is slavery in communist countries. America has freedom as a core value because of our Judeo-Christian value system, and we're losing it. Notice what the church, what was closed in California during the COVID thing. Strip bars could stay open, but churches had to close. The Sabbath command is given with a reason. It could have simply been the command, keep the Sabbath, but it gives a reason because human beings are rational beings with a need for meaning. And the Sabbath affirms every week God, the God we serve the Creator God. The Sabbath says He is the Creator. It's a universal command because all men are created to be free, and free people, unlike slaves, can choose not to work one day a week.
Yeah, and there's a freedom in not working, when you
Yes,
think about it.
yes. If a guy is a multimillionaire who works 7 days a week, guess what? He is a rich slave. Every man needs a day to take off of his work and to reflect on the meaning of life. Why am I a human being? Why was I born? What is my relationship to God? So, and there is a.
Let me just so you talk, there's all the wonderful things about the Sabbath day, and it's all great. So why do you think it's so hard for people to keep the Sabbath day, being that it's such a wonderful gift that God gives us?
That is the $64,000 question. If you remember the old show.
Yeah.
It is because there is a being who wants to take worship away from the Creator. Just stop worshiping the Creator. And He influences human beings to go that direction. He wants to, you notice that with satanic worship, death is always associated with it. It is a focus on death. It's also a focus on slavery. So God is focused on life and He's focused on freedom. Those are two major themes of the Ten Commandments and being a servant of God. So freedom is unique to God worship, and a slave cannot choose to take off work once a week. Only free men can do that. There's also a unique quality of being named after God, Church of God. Now, I want to point out, since we are all part of the Church of God.
Oh, and one thing you mentioned, the slaves, you talk about slavery. The Sabbath was also, if you had slaves back then, or if you had servants, they were supposed to take the day off too. So that was
even the animals,
yeah,
the animals, your employees, they all were to be given that freedom, because meaning to life is what does Viktor Frankl say? A man who has a why can deal with any how. Why of life is at the core of our existence. Okay. So we, being a part of a Sabbath-keeping church, the Sabbath has kept the Church of God as much as the Church of God has kept the Sabbath. It binds us as a culture of people. I was a part of a Sabbath-keeping church once that repudiated the Sabbath. It had kept it, kept the holy days, and then the leaders came along and said, no, you can't do it. And I wrote them a letter and I said, it's interesting that you're talking about freedom in Christ. I came here leaving a Sunday-keeping church, knowing full well what this church teaches. I chose it because of my freedom to obey God. And now you're telling me that I can't do the things that God tells me to do out of freedom in Christ. How does that make sense? So then they changed their name, and they have really I mean, they're nothing anymore.
Mhm.
Once the church gave up the Sabbath, it no longer belonged to God. We are the church of God, identified by his creation, and therefore we keep the Sabbath as a recognition of he being the creator.
Yeah, that's interesting that they changed their name too. You
They
know,
changed their name.
they changed
Mhm.
their name.
They
So
lost the name. They don't
Mhm.
belong to God anymore. Uh, all right, I don't want to. I don't want to get you guys kicked off. So these are the opinions, which may not necessarily be the opinions of all of the ones.
yeah, we need to say that from time to time on this
Mhm.
show. We've had some issues with that in the past, but I
Yeah,
think everybody understands that these are not the necessarily the opinions of CGI,
right,
but some of our guests have their own opinions. Yeah.
right. Yes. Uh, okay. So he says, 6 days shall you labor and do all of your work. The Bible recognizes the value of work, but neither work nor money are inherently wrong. But the Sabbath is above both of them. The Sabbath is as good as work is, as good as money is, and they are good. Uh, the Sabbath is above those things. So, in some cases, we're not talking about what's good or bad; it's what's bad or worse. In some cases, we're not. In this case, we're not talking about what's good or bad. We're talking about what's good and better, and the Sabbath is the best.
One thing I want to mention about the Sabbath, I read an article probably a few weeks ago, and I'm sure it's still true today that the people are unhappy with their jobs in the United States at an all-time high.
Yeah,
That like I think almost like 80% of people are wanting to quit their jobs, and I and I think that it has something to do with not having because they're a slave to their job and they don't have the proper rest or the proper uh, you know, feeling about their
they don't get
work.
the meaning of life. You're right. They
Yeah.
haven't taken that time to sit down and think about what life is about. Dusty Howell gave an excellent, several excellent. While I was gone on sabbatical, Dusty was speaking here at Church of God Cincinnati, and he gave well, every sermon was very good, but a couple of them were on gratitude. What the Sabbath does is get us in the habit of giving thanks to God,
Mhm.
of giving praise to God. Okay, so his point is that happiness, ungrateful people are not happy. Grateful people are happy people.
Mhm.
Grateful people are, they feel meaning to life because they have gone to give thanks to God. They have become different. So therefore, work is better, life is better. Whatever they deal with, even though this is something I may not. It's sort of like I've got a menu of food on my plate, and Mom said, "You're going to have to eat those green beans if you're going to get dessert." Okay, I'll eat the green beans. I'll be happy about eating green beans as long as I can have that chocolate cake. So, uh,
Mhm.
being grateful for things makes us happier.
Mhm.
Okay, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. The Sabbath belongs to God. No man has the authority to change it. To observe another day recognizes the authority of man, not the authority of God.
That's a big point. That's very good. I really like that.
Mhm.
It is. It's important for us to come to that. Okay, now I'm running a little overtime here. Do you want to stop now, or you?
Yeah, keep going, keep going. We
Okay.
can go a little extra.
All right. In it, the Sabbath, you shall do no work, you nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. This is a revolutionary concept. No other society or culture has ever granted by law a day of rest for slaves, a
Mhm.
day of rest for these foreigners that come into the country. If the USA were to become slaves to China or Russia or Iran, would those governments allow our citizens a day of rest? This means that slaves too, as I think you guys pointed out a while ago, they're human beings. Slaves are not just animals. The Sabbath makes them human. It provides ethical treatment for these people, and it even provides ethical treatment for animals. Even your animals are to rest on the Sabbath.
Yeah,
So,
what's interesting, Jim, is when you look back on our history, even though they were for Sunday, the blue laws, which said you can't do this, you can't sell that, we're going to close down on Sunday. At
Mhm.
least there was that concept of a rest day
Mhm.
within our society. That is going out the window in most places in this country. There may be a county here or a county there where you can't get something on a Sunday, but Saturday is a non-issue.
God blesses us for what we know. Some people don't know everything that you know, and therefore they may suffer somewhat. So even the concept of a rest day is beneficial to mankind.
Mhm.
So um, the Sabbath command, my point in all of this, is a profoundly moral command about what it is about the good benefit for human
Mhm.
beings.
Mhm.
For instance,
That's funny. That's ironic because when you think of this, if you split the Ten Commandments up, most people think the moral stuff is dealing with people, but you've
Mhm.
just made a great case that no, it's not just the people commands, it's also the God commands that have a moral capacity.
at the
Mhm.
core of it, that's right. That's right. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and then all that in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the seventh day and hallowed it. So the Sabbath is outside nature. You know, all of our holy days, it comes in this season, that season. It is agriculturally based, things like that. The Sabbath is the one holy day that stands above all of those. It's not related to nature. Every seven, count every seven. It's not the lunar oriented day. It is a 7 day week. So it's
Mhm.
outside of nature.
Yeah, and it's what our country needs. I think another statistic I know of is that Americans work more hours than other developed countries in the world. For example, like we work like on average, I think it's 400 more hours a year on the job than Germany with what they
Really?
work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that again, and again, there's a lot of people who want us to go to 4-day work weeks or whatever. I think a lot of it would be solved by keeping the Sabbath day and understanding that principle of rest, and also God's holy days, right? Because not only you have the Sabbath day, you have holy days that give you time to refresh with God. God kind of builds those things in for people.
He built it in for us. And the month corresponds to one complete cycle of the phases of the moon, but the week does not correspond to the planetary movements. It is unnatural, it is completely arbitrary. In fact, the Egyptians had a 10-day week, and the month was 3 10-day cycles, making a 30-day month.
Hmm.
Therefore, observing the Sabbath is a recognition of the creator of nature,
Hmm.
affirming the existence of a God who is above nature. Um,
You got to ask yourself this question, guys. How is it that this 7 day week has stood the test of time? That
Hmm.
it
exactly.
has remained there?
It is a testimony to the power of God.
Is there any place in the world where they don't have a 7-day week that you know of?
Yes, there are,
Okay.
but they're generally minor. Some place you would never go. I mean, there are some places where there's a place that has the hour cycle is at the top of the hour is at 15 minutes rather than So there's some odd places like that, but
Mhm.
it's generally universal. Some things,
Universal, there's that 7-day week that kind of like our bodies were made for that.
yeah,
They have a work week in that 7-day week.
What
And
if the day were 36 hours long and what would the body do? So God did this for our benefit. Finally, last thing, the most important verse in the Bible is Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Everything else in the Bible hangs on this verse. Meaning and purpose in life rests on this verse. Without it, life is random. There is no right and wrong. Everything depends on God creating the world. He is the universal God. He is the sovereign God. He is the ultimate in what is right and wrong. And so when a man makes a law contrary to God, it's man's law. And therefore, not to say that we shouldn't make laws. We do have to have laws, but not when they contradict what God's laws are. Okay, I'm done.
Thanks, Jim. Very, very interesting discussion. I like when you bring up a subject, you get into some things I wasn't thinking about with that
Yeah.
subject. So really appreciate it.
Hey, it's good to be here. You guys are doing a great thing. I do appreciate all that you do. And the opportunity to work together like this is just it's a testimony to all of those who are in the Church of God and other places that we are each independent and free, and we choose to work together, and it works well like that.
I think I don't know if we've ever covered the Sabbath day on Prove All Things. This is our 101 episode, and that's one of the basics. Of what
Yeah, I think you're right, Jeff. There's so many facets to the Sabbath, but we will be revisiting this topic. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that the point you bring out, the one that really sticks with me today is about the freedom that comes with keeping the Sabbath day, that we're no longer a slave. And the ones that don't keep it, the ones who they're slaves, and it's evident they're slaves. That and again, I remember when I work for the church now, and I feel myself very blessed for that, and I work on the Sabbath because of that. In a sense, but when I was working at other jobs, I would always tell them that I have to be off from Friday sunset to Saturday sunset, and that was the only thing keeping me some weeks from working 7 days. And other people would look at me, and I would be like, "All right, it's sundown. See y'all later. I'm out of here." And they'd be like, "Well, there's still work to be done." And he's leaving. Like, where's he going? And then they wouldn't see me until afterwards. And I was like, "Well, they're the slaves, right? They're the ones that have to keep working. But hey, like, I got it. God says I don't have to work, so I'm out of here, guys." And it was a great feeling to be able to do that. It was sometimes the only time I had off during the week, so it's definitely a wonderful gift if you keep it.
It is a great gift.
And I would say for people out there watching, if you probably, there's people out here who are probably watching us who don't keep the Sabbath, or maybe thinking about keeping the Sabbath. I think those are some good things to consider when making that decision in your life. 'Cause I guess it is that there's that. I asked you the question before: why do so many people don't do it? I think society, because it's the God of the world is Satan, makes it hard on people to have that freedom, to have that Sabbath day.
That's a good point. And when Jesus Christ returns to the earth, we know from many scriptures, but particularly Zechariah, 14, that these things are going to be reinstituted. Jesus will be, and so this will become then a universal law for the entire world. And right now, it's not that way. But when Christ, so if he's going to do it then, why not just start doing it now?
Yeah, that's a question that we should always ask people, because there is that scripture about the Feast of Tabernacles that those who don't keep the Feast of Tabernacles, which is part of God's holy day system and Sabbath day system, he's pretty upset with them when they're not keeping it. That he's like, you're not going to get rain, so if God feels that much about that, then why does he not feel the same today? If he's the same yesterday, today, and forever.
That's there's a profound statement there. In other words, God doesn't have to curse Egypt for not keeping the Sabbath. What he's doing is saying, okay, I'm the one who gives. I give blessings. And you have the right, when you walk down the street and somebody begs for money, you might say, here, I want to give you this. You also have the right to say, no, I won't, or I'm out of money. I've given it all away. I mean, Peter said, silver and gold have I none. Okay, that's your choice. God is the giver. He has a right to give rain to whomever he wants to give rain. Mm-hmm. And so you want to get rain, come to the giver. That's why I come worship God. He's the giver. He's God.
Yeah, I got to tell you, just I'm thinking about the Sabbath right now, and just when Friday night's coming on, and knowing I can sleep in, knowing everything's going to relax right now, it's just a great feeling. I'll never give that up.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of burden is that?
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
I say, what kind of burden is keeping
exactly?
Yeah,
exactly.
So again, critics of what we do, they try to say that we're somehow it's works, right? You're doing works, but the only thing that they don't want to keep is the lack of work. Like they accuse them of doing works, but they'll keep the other 9 commandments, but the one that tells you not to work is the one they don't want to keep, which accuses of doing works. It's like it's the opposite.
That's good, Jeff. I like that.
When God told Moses to come down from the mountain, and he said, he doesn't say they have rejected me from being God. He says they have rejected my way.
Mm-hmm.
To reject the way of God is to reject God. Mm-hmm. I mean, your kids, if they did something that discredited your family, you would sit down in front of them and say, "No, look, you made us look bad. You made our family look bad. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't want me to go out and rob a bank because everybody would know that I'm a bank robber and that your dad's a bank robber." Mm-hmm. Okay. So the way of God defines who we worship.
Mm-hmm. Very much, and that's definitely great points there. Again, thank you for bringing this topic today. I think it's definitely a great one. I'm thinking about, when's the Sabbath? The Sabbath's a few days away now, so we got a little bit of time to get that rest again. But it's definitely a great blessing to have that, and and also the part of that commandment also is that work that we do. The other days we do work, and I think it makes work more fulfilling, by having that time to like you said before, to like be blessed and be thankful for those blessings and the things that God gives us. It just makes you happier. So again, thank you. Do you have any final words you want to give the people watching out there before we leave, Jim?
I appreciate being here, and this is a great opportunity. So thanks for allowing me to be on your program.
All right. Thanks for joining us
today.
Today.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you.
And thank everybody out there who's been watching today. We thank you for joining us. We'll see you again on another episode of Prove All Things. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks a lot.